Welcome to the Mouse Bytes podcast. Here we go.
Hello and welcome to Mouse Bytes, the show all about Disney video games past and present, episode 14. I'm your host, Clay, and today I'm joined by Jeph. Hello, Jeph.
Well, hello, Clay. How you doing, buddy?
Good, sir. How are you?
Doing pretty well. Can't complain.
Good. Yeah. How are you? You're not grumpy at all? You're in a good mood?
Yeah, so far I'm in a good mood. I haven't snapped or quacked.
No quacking yet?
No.
Well, I've been working on my Donald Duck impression in preparation for this episode, but
oh, good.
Unfortunately, it's just not up to snuff as of yet. So maybe the next time we cover a Donald episode, I'll have it more where it needs to be. So
I look forward to that.
Yeah, you'll have to stay tuned, everyone.
Yeah, that's one I still haven't been able to figure out either.
Yeah, you got the Mickey down though. So
yep.
You got one up on me, so when I do it, I just sound like a pedophile. So you don't want that. But
nope.
yeah, so ladies and gentlemen, we have a great episode for you today. As I mentioned, this is episode 14. And before we start, I guess real quick, I don't know if I mentioned this in the last episode, just apologies if there are kind of a lull of episodes here. I am getting ready to move to a different state at the end of this month, and so things are a little crazy, so just bear with us if we're a little short on the episodes for the next month or so, but we're going to do our best to still keep bringing you more episodes all about Disney video games, so stay tuned. We have lots of exciting things planned in the near future, don't we, Jeph?
Yes, we do.
All right, well, without further ado, today's episode, we are focusing on strictly talking about Donald Duck's Goin Quackers. Here we go. Good stuff. All right, so to start off this episode, Jeph, what the heck is this game?
Well, I'm glad that you asked. This is Donald Duck Goin Quackers to us, but to our friends across the pond over in Europe, it is actually called Donald Duck Quack Attack, or is it just Quack Attack?
I think it's Donald Duck Quack Attack. I think it's still got Donald in it.
Oh yeah, it is Donald Duck Quack Attack. So I'm not, it's just so odd to me when games or movies or whatever have different names in different regions, especially more so now. Back then, I guess that maybe markets were a little less connected. There wasn't the internet per se as we know it today. So culturally, there could be more of a divide. I feel like today we're just kind of all on the same page. With, we all use Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. So no idea why the title difference. It kind of reminds me of like Zootopia. The Disney film was called something completely different in Europe, and really not sure why. So,
do you know what is it called?
I had it at the tip of my tongue, but I can't remember. We'll have to look that up later, just because it might bother somebody. But anyway, so yeah, the other what this game is it is an action platformer per se, but it is very, very similar to a PlayStation 1 classic known as Crash Bandicoot. Several levels in this game, I don't know if it's the majority. Yeah, probably the majority of the levels in this game are in the style of either running away from or towards the camera, in that kind of Crash style where it is 3D, but it's kind of in a corridor.
Right.
It does, however, also have some 2D platformers, kind of akin, like 2.5D, sort of like New Super Mario Brothers or anything else that resembles that. Yoshi's Story. Things like that. Tarzan. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of games we've covered that actually are similar to this game as far as like Hercules is chase levels, and then the Tarzan and Hercules like side scrollers. So yeah, I guess you could say that it's really following in Hercules' footsteps more than anything.
But I mean, on the internet, literally, everybody refers to Crash Bandicoot, and I can totally see why.
It definitely is more so like Crash than those other ones were. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this game was released in October of 2000. It has an interesting dev story behind it in that it was developed by 3 different studios, and different studios made different versions of the same game. So it was, I guess we can just kind of go down what consoles it was released on.
Okay.
And then I can kind of go into what versions there are and just kind of what the slight differences are.
Yeah.
Not going too in depth, but it was released for the Game Boy Color, the Game Boy Advance, Windows PC, PlayStation 1, the Nintendo 64, the Sega Dreamcast, PlayStation 2, and the GameCube. And so certain versions were done by certain studios, one being Ubisoft Casablanca, which made it the first game developed in Africa, which is pretty cool, the first AAA game.
Yeah.
I'm sure there'd been something before that, but yeah, the first major game developed in Africa. They handled the N64, PC, and Dreamcast version. Just quick note of that version of the game has a completely different soundtrack than some of the other versions, which is an interesting and odd thing to do, but they did it. And then there's just variations to the levels. There's a lot of similarities in the general overarching story, and like what you're doing is about the same, but it's like in one you collect stars and one you collect gears, and like there's just weird differences that are just completely unnecessary, and you think the design team should have collaborated a little better, but again, this is before the common internet age as we know it, and it was probably just a little more difficult for them to do that. Probably would have been counterproductive. So Ubisoft Shanghai over in China did the PlayStation 1 and eventually the Game Boy Advance version. I guess there's 4 studios, not 3. Ubisoft Montreal did the PS2 and the GameCube version, which in my opinion is like the best version. Just
Definitely.
on research, it just looks good. It has good music, good variety of sound effects, all that good stuff. And then Ubisoft Milan, who we actually know from the more recent Raving Rabbids, Mario and plus Rabbids crossover, did the Game Boy Color version of the game. So kind of cool to have that. So yeah, that pretty much covers what the heck the game is. I don't know if you had anything else to kind of add in or put on there.
It was released October 19th of 2000. I could add that.
I might have said that before I went into the development studios, but yes.
I don't remember if you did, so
that's okay.
I just felt like I would add something.
Yeah.
So there's that.
I think there was varying release dates for like North America and PAL,
probably,
and, like, the Game Boy Advance one. So
I highly doubt that all these versions came out on one
don't
day.
think so.
Yeah. So
I guess one more thing of note for the development and what the heck the game is that it's actually built on the Rayman 2 engine, a very optimized version of that.
Yes.
Which it looks like it. It looks very similar.
Well, and it's
style.
not every version. I think it's just the N64, Dreamcast, PC, and PS1 versions.
Oh, okay.
All use that. So.
Misread that then. That's interesting that they would use different versions for different systems.
Yeah.
It's such a weird development.
Yeah, it really is. And it's kind of made it interesting watching different people review the different versions and watching gameplay side by side. Because, I mean, like you said, everything, it's like, oh, the first area it is all like in the forest jungle, but literally everybody, like pretty much every version has a different level set up. The levels play out completely differently. Like you said, different collectibles. But they all have the same plot and general, like, same idea going.
Aesthetics,
Yeah, aesthetics and all that. So it's so weird.
It is very weird.
In fact, for the longest time, I didn't realize it was a GameCube game. I thought it was only an N64 one with some other, ports going out at the same time. I didn't realize this one got released on, 2 different generations for the longest time. So
I thought there were 2 different games. I thought there was just a Donald Duck game for the N64 and a Donald Duck game for the GameCube that was like a sequel. I didn't realize. I knew they were both existed, but yeah. It is weird to me, like, because obviously the GameCube didn't come out until a year after this was released, because it came out in October 2000, so that would have, if it did come out, it would have been a launch game for the PS2. If it came out at the same time as the GameCube version, then it would have been a year later. So either way, it's kind of odd to re-release a game like that. I don't know if they just thought they'd reach a better audience or just the better horsepower. No idea what the thought process was there.
Yeah.
But a fascinating backstory.
So, Jeph, what history do you have with this game?
Well, like many games, my history is that I knew it existed. I remember seeing the ads for it in like Expert Gamer or even Nintendo Power, and I don't recall being super interested in it. I thought it looked funny, and I couldn't believe that it had sort of implications of swearing on the logo.
Yeah.
In the logo, the A in Quackers is an @ symbol. There's also an asterisk and an exclamation point over Quackers. So it definitely looks like Donald is angry in the cover art. And anyway, that all stood out to me. I was just like, wow, this is a Disney game, and yet they're kind of being edgy with it.
Yeah.
Which is what Donald Duck was created for originally, was because Mickey had become too wholesome, and Disney wanted to have somebody who could be angry. So,
Well,
it works.
This game's all about being angry for sure.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Indeed. So what about you?
I don't have a ton either. This wasn't a game that I played back in the day. I think eventually I purchased a copy for the N64, and then eventually I got a hold of a Game Boy Color version, and then most recently purchased a copy on GameCube. I found it for like super cheap, and
Nice.
And so I was real excited, like, oh, I maybe could like try the different versions. I didn't even realize how different they were when I bought all of them, but I think I just kept coming across. I really will buy any Disney game that I come across in the wild, so I just kind of naturally picked those up. And then, as I mentioned earlier, I'm packing currently to move, and stupid me, I went and packed away my GameCube and Game Boy Color versions, and so earlier this week I was like, oh, I'll go see if I can pull them back out, but then I was like, I'd have to pull out a Wii or GameCube just to be able to play them, and so finally I was just like, I'm just going to play the N64 version, and because I still have that out, and just leave the rest where they are. And so I was a little bummed because I was looking forward to trying out the GameCube version, but so pretty much for the whole episode here, me and Jeph are going to be talking mostly about the N64 version, because that's the version we played. I sat down and played this game for about 2 hours total. I did it in like 2 sittings and was able to beat the whole game. I didn't 100% it, but I beat it, and I kind of was like purposely kind of speeding through some of it and not getting everything, just to be able to see everything in time. And but yeah, I mean, it's a really easy. It was like a 2 hours total kind of thing. So not a super long game, and we can talk a little more about that later. But so that's kind of my history with it. I love Donald games. Like, I have a bunch of older ones, and so I was excited, that this existed, but really didn't know a lot about it going in, other than, it was a Donald game. So I'm kind of bummed that it took me this long to experience it, but I'm glad that we're finally taking a look at it. So that is about it for the top of the show here. Let's listen to some music from the game, and then we will jump into gameplay discussion. All right, to start off our gameplay discussion, we are going to talk about the visuals of this game. So, Jeph, if you want, maybe you could start us off talking about the N64 version, and then, because that's the version we both played, maybe after that I could hit on some things I've noticed looking at a couple of the other versions, and any other thoughts I had about the N64.
Sure. So, yeah, as far as the visuals go, this is a late generation N64 games, so it does look pretty good, I would say, overall. It It came out very close to the same time as Mickey Speedway USA, which was another game for the N64 that we covered already. And I would say graphically and texture-wise, it is comparable. Kind of following the Mickey and Friends pattern of cartoony style for backgrounds and visuals. The character models are a little blocky on the N64 version, obviously because of the system power restraints. One interesting thing to note visually is that because the N64's storage limitations, they couldn't include the FMV full motion video cutscenes, which was pretty common. We commented on that in Tarzan and Hercules. Or actually Hercules was not. But anyway, we commented that on Tarzan,
Yes.
not having the FMV clips from the movies. Obviously, this one's not based on a movie, so this one, the other versions, like the Dreamcast and PC version, had pre-rendered cutscenes that were fully animated and all that. The N64 one does an admirable job of doing real-time cutscenes with lip syncing.
Mhm.
Honestly, the closest comparison I can think of is Conker's Bad Fur Day, but I don't know many other N64 games that had it like that, fully voiced with
Yeah,
lip
the
syncing.
fact that it even has fully voiced, cutscenes in it is rather impressive for the
It really
console.
is.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yep. Let's see what else. The environments are they can be a little empty feeling, like lacking either far back detail or overall just kind of empty walking areas. But in general, I'd say like the geometry and kind of there's like tree stumps in the forest that are down and different things. Like in the city, you can see buildings just one layer back behind you and different things like that. Like there's detail there, but again, I really just think it was a limitation of the system not allowing more detail. And especially for like the 2D side scrollers, I would have liked to see a little more of like a background painting or something. But
Yeah.
like Hercules did on the PlayStation 1, something like that would have been cool. But it still doesn't look terrible. The draw distance, because these are like run at the camera or run away from the camera style games, the draw distance isn't terrible as far as the pop in. And I would say that Ubisoft Casablanca, I guess, did the N64 one. They did a really good job with fading in objects rather than popping them in.
Yeah.
Without using fog, and I think that's great because the N64 you either had fog or pop in on so many games. So it's in my opinion, they did a good job making them kind of like, if you're looking at the action right where Donald is, you don't even notice it. If you look up at the top of the screen or the bottom of the screen, depending, like you see it, but like it's not bad. I mean, there's tons of other stuff, like the UI and all that stuff is adequately, that's my favorite word. It works. It's got Donald's icon and for his life, and that changes when you get hit to a little more upset. Other stuff, like it looks good. It shows you what you need to see.
Yeah.
What about you? Do you want to go into this? I kind of just went rambling there.
No, you're good. I totally agree with everything you said as far as the N64 one goes. Really, the only thing that like super bothered me is the second world. You hit the boss is one of the Beagle boys or brothers or whatever they are.
Yeah.
His like character model and polygons are
Cutscene is
so rough, dude. Like,
I agree.
They just did not spend enough time with it, and I know that it's probably because he spends the majority of his time like in a what's the thing he's driving? It's like a wrecking ball thing.
Yeah.
And so half the time he's like sitting in it, but every now and then he stands up, and the cutscene he does, and he just he looks. It's so polygonal, and there's just no natural like
curvature.
Curve. And
I think they modeled it to be like he's in the distance in the boss fight, but then they used it in the cutscene, and that was a really bad idea.
Yeah, like super zoomed in, and it's just it looks really rough, and I was kind of cringing about that. But really, other than that, I didn't have too many issues. The enemies, for the most part, look relatively pretty good. I really like Donald's dance animation when he collects the
milkshake.
No, it's the
Like the
like
boss token.
Yeah, the puzzle piece boss token
little
thing.
booty shake.
Yeah, he shakes his little booty.
I was gonna comment on how much I love when he gets the milkshake, so that's interesting that we both kind of noticed that. It's great animation.
Yeah, it's super endearing. It is kind of funny when you see Donald kind of in a good mood, and so they took advantage. So, other than that, a couple other things I've noticed. The PC version has like super intense like shadows in it for some reason.
Interesting.
It's like super dark and really threw me off at first. And I was like, what the heck? So I don't know if you can turn them down or something, but a lot of the footage I've seen for the PC version is just like really dark at times. Other than that, there was something. Yeah, like you mentioned earlier, the GameCube version and I assume the PS2 version by far look the best. Even just like simple things like loading screens. Granted, the N64 doesn't really have loading screens. They at least did some really cool things aesthetically too. They have like these blueprint loading screens that look really good. The cutscenes look really polished, and the shading looks right, and the shadows all look right. It's kind of got like a cell shading outline kind of thing going on in some of it. But yeah, it works so much better. And if you got a GameCube, I would probably recommend that version, even though it plays different than the one I played. So
yeah, and it's a different soundtrack.
Yeah, that too.
But we'll go into that later.
Yeah. Visually, I try to think if there's anything else. I don't know. I can't think of anything.
Nah, I think we pretty much covered it. Like, texture work is really good, and the lighting on the PS2 and GameCube version looks really nice. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
Moving on to the audio part, as Jeff mentioned earlier, there are two different composers depending on which version you play. Daniel Masson did the N64, PC, Dreamcast, Game Boy Color version. Sean K. Clement did the PS1, PS2, GameCube Advance version. So obviously we played the N64 one, so I don't think either of us could really speak into the other version.
No.
But my thoughts on the music, it's just okay.
Yep.
I maybe even side towards I'm not a fan of it, I guess.
Yeah, it's like elevator jazz or something.
Yeah, it's not great, and every now and then I hear something, especially since it's the N64, MIDI, where I'm like, oh, this kind of sounds like a Rare game or something, but then that whole thought like goes away really quickly.
Yeah,
like it almost feels like they're gonna hit something where I'm like, ooh, this could be really catchy, and then all of a sudden it's like, no, it's not.
Yeah, I feel like they shied away from making a strong melody in any of the levels, and they kind of just went for that backgroundy, floaty. It's got a lot of bass, kind of really standing out more than just being like a backup underlying bass tone. It's like the slap bass is like the primary thing you're hearing for a lot of it. Which isn't terrible in and of itself, and it's actually on MIDI. It doesn't sound awful,
right?
So, but I don't know. Yeah, I agree with you that it's just sort of like I feel like there's something that I'm gonna like, and then it kind of just moves on, like before it really gets good.
Yeah, unfortunately. I
did notice for when you do collect the little milkshake or ice cream thing. In the N64 version, there's a special song that plays, and it's sort of like Donald's invincibility mode or whatever. He kind of goes into a rage. The music plays, and I like that little tune for whatever reason. And I have to admit, I didn't have the game on an N64, so I was playing on an emulator. And you'll have to tell me if you noticed this or not on original hardware. But the song loop for the invincibility is like about 1 second shorter than the actual invincibility lasts.
Oh.
So it just sort of cuts off abruptly and then starts over, and then it fades out like a second later. It's really, I found that to be obnoxious. Again, I don't know if this is an emulation issue or just some really poor planning. Did you notice that at all?
I didn't notice that, but
okay,
you're right. That's like not great. So
it's just like they can control the time of the invincibility, and they can control the time of the loop. So why not sync those?
Yeah.
So, we'll. I guess we can kind of dig deeper into that another time. But I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, no standout tracks for me in this one.
No, yeah, unfortunately not. I guess the only other thing worth mentioning in the audio section here, as we mentioned earlier, there is voice work done, voice acting, I guess, and so we have some voice actors that do these characters that are here for this. You can't do a Donald game without a Donald voice from a real Donald voice actor. So that Daisy was definitely I don't know what her name is.
I don't know her name, but
yeah.
the current one has been doing it for like 25 years or 30 years now.
The guy who does the voice of the villain sounded like the guy from the DuckTales movie. Have you seen the DuckTales movie?
No, I haven't seen that. Maybe saw it when I was a kid, but yeah, I don't
Come on,
remember.
dude. That's a good movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, they pulled the villain from that into this, and so I'm pretty sure that was him because it sounded a lot like him, and I've seen that movie. But yeah, so I mean, there's not a ton of it, but every now and then there is some voice acting. Really, with the N64 one, it's at the beginning and at the end.
Yeah.
I noticed in the other versions there's more cutscenes, but not in this one, which I want to bring up later because it's not really for this part, but I feel like if I don't mention it now, I won't mention it later. That feels super weird that it doesn't work that way, basically. And so you get to the end and there's just a lot of things that don't make any sense. Like there's these like what are the things that go on the roof that tell you which way the wind's blowing? Like a wind
weather vane.
Weather vane. In some of the other versions you collect weather vanes to somehow help you get to Daisy, but in the N64 one you never collect one. But then at the end of the game, but like every now and then you like you're working on a weather vane and like you're like, what? It just doesn't make any sense.
There's a whole subplot of trying to fix, was it Gyro's machine, so that he can get you to this foreign place where Murloc is. Yeah,
and they just don't really explain it. Donald's buddy, the other duck, what's his name? Gladstone. At the very beginning, he takes off. And then you're like, I don't think so. And then you don't see him until the very end. And it's just like, what happened to him? Like, so I know I'm getting off topic here, but it's just like in the N64 one, they ended up having to cut some things out. And it just makes for a really confusing time because you're like, I don't know half of what's going on right now because it's just not explained.
It just becomes a game at that point. There's not a story or anything because it's lost. So
unfortunately, that hurts the N64 version of my eyes. There's just not a complete story, and the cutscenes are lacking. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I just had to bring it up because we were talking about audio wise. Anything else visually, audio wise you want to?
Yeah, just real quick, I want to touch on the sound effects and voice samples used during gameplay. The sound effects are very much taken right out of the old cartoons, kind of the cartoony Looney Tunes and early Mickey sound effects. When you jump on enemies, or even when you just jump as Donald, you get a nice little whoop and stuff like that.
Nice.
One thing I noticed is the voice samples used for Donald. They're in general not intrusive or overly used, except when you get that invincibility milkshake I talked about earlier. There's only 2 voice samples, and it just repeats them sometimes back to back and sometimes like alternating. But it's just a little way too redundant. So I think I watched a PS or a GameCube version on YouTube, and I didn't really notice those same problems. I think obviously because there's more storage space on the discs, they could put more voice samples and vary it more.
Yeah.
But yeah, other than that, I mean, the audio design I thought was perfect for what it needed to be. Nothing groundbreaking, of course, but like good use of sound effects for when they needed to be. Nothing was too annoying or redundant, like I kind of had noticed in, say, like Hercules.
Yeah, that one was very redundant. Yeah, I really honestly didn't notice anything that seemed overly redundant to me. Okay. So that I was like fine with it. Maybe that's just because it was in 64, and so maybe they're a little less often on there, whereas a PlayStation 1 could, I don't know, do more of them. It doesn't really make sense, but just a theory. So moving on, we have we're hitting on to our gameplay and difficulty. So real quick, I'll just, to the best of my ability, kind of explain if we haven't already explained. Now, I'm just saying the N64 version here because I'm looking at all these other versions, and there's different goals and things that you're doing. So in the N64 one, you start out and you basically go to an area. This is completely exactly like Crash Bandicoot, where there are a number of levels to choose from. Maybe not the first Crash Bandicoot, but like the third one. And you get to pick out of 4 levels which one you want to choose, and you can do them in any order. And basically they're portals. You go into them and it takes you to each level. And then after you beat that area, it opens up a portal to more portals, blah, blah, blah. Now the interesting thing is the game kind of assumes that you're going to pick the far left level first. And so that first level is the tutorial level. For whatever reason, I didn't pick that level first. And so I was kind of confused on some of the mechanics starting out, just because I accidentally didn't pick the tutorial level first. And then on the second level, I picked it. And then I was like, oh, it kind of explains some of the things. And then it made more sense. So that was kind of weird, but I guess it's neat that you can pick what level and what order you want to do them. Other than that, really what order you play them in doesn't affect anything. You don't unlock anything that helps you. In certain levels, they're really, you just can kind of pick when you want to do them. So each level may or may not be, left to right side scroller or a front to back, view from behind kind of thing. And so you go through the level. As you're in the level, you're collecting things, obviously. Stars being the main collectible in the N64 version. And so you are collecting them. I think if you get 100, you get an extra life. On top of that, there are also 3 hidden toys that Huey, Dewey, and Louie have in each level. And so in order to collect them, you have to activate this creepy book-looking thing that has the face of the bad guy for some reason because he put a spell on him. And then it puts up a timer, and you have to hurry and get to the toy. Otherwise, it kind of grades itself back out, and you can't collect it, and you have to go back and do it again. Now, luckily, the game allows you to do it again. If you mess it up, you can go back and try again. It's a fun little side thing. Something to do in the levels, a little extra challenge, I guess. Some could argue that it kind of breaks up the gameplay or maybe slows you down. But honestly, if you don't want to collect them, you just move right past them and it's no big deal. Jeff, what did you think about the toy thing? Did you like it? Or
Yeah, I liked it. It gave you kind of an extra incentive to explore, maybe drop down into an area or look up above you or, stuff like that. So, in that regard, it fit in with both the games of the time and just in general, it makes you explore the level more than just running from point A to point B. So
totally.
I like those.
Cool. On top of that, there are checkpoints throughout each level, which in the N64 version, the check marks are represented by checkered stripes on the ground. Like what you would see.
Very misleading. It looks like a finish line.
It's so misleading. I'm like, because when I didn't do the tutorial, I'm like, what? Is there a race somewhere?
Did I finish it? Yeah.
I'm confused. And so I noticed in the PS1 version, they did not do that. They didn't represent it with the checkered thing. They did it literally has the words checkpoint on it. Basically ripped straight from Crash Bandicoot, basically.
Nice.
Then lastly, as we mentioned earlier, toward the end of the level, there is a hidden piece of, split up that you need all of the pieces in order to unlock the boss level to progress to the boss to make it to the next level or whatever. And so if you miss that, you cannot fight the boss. And so there was one time I was just cruising through the level and I didn't look for it and I finished the level and had to do the whole thing over. And so I don't think that's how the other versions work. A lot of them, from what I can tell, it just has that window vein thing right at the end of the level. You collect it and then that finishes the level for you. But in the N64 one, you have to collect that, maybe finish the last quarter of the level, and then there's a portal that you go through. But if you get to the portal and you haven't found it, you could turn around hypothetically and go back and try to find it. But the one thing I noticed is there's no way to tell if you've collected that piece. If you hit start, it doesn't show that you've collected it. So you just have to remember that you have it, which I guess isn't that hard. But there was a couple times where I was like, did I already get it? I can't remember. And you literally can't tell. So
a little inventory screen on the pause screen would have been very helpful.
Yeah.
Or even just something on the main
Yeah, just a
heads-up
really
display.
small icon.
Yeah.
So, not a huge deal. Gameplay wise, you can basically take 2 hits in this game.
Yep.
After the first hit, Donald gets angry, and then he, for a short time, becomes invincible because he's just in a mad fury. And
Rage cloud.
Yes, which makes him, I think, a little bit harder to control. Kind of like Mario when he in Mario 64 when he falls in the fire, kind of like that.
Yeah.
But then you can also collect the milkshake, which apparently milkshakes make Donald very happy. And at that point, he goes into another invincibility for a longer period of time than when he's angry. And so that kind of takes you back up to full health, I guess. So it's a little confusing at first how health works. But after a while, it's not overly too terribly confusing.
Right.
Real quick, if you had anything, you can comment on that. But I forgot to mention with the Huey and Louie thing, if you get all 3 items in each level, it unlocks a new level. It's like a chase level. I think there's like one with a bear and a couple other ones. And then if you do those, it unlocks new outfits that Donald can wear, which apparently, depending on your version, the outfits appear in the cutscenes, and they have different idle animations. But as far as I can tell, that's all they do. But there's like a tourist one and a couple other ones. So just thought I mentioned that. But yeah, other than the health, you have a double jump, which if you know me, you know I love my double jumps. And so those are very helpful. And then you have a basic attack button where Donald just kind of punches in a fury. So really, as far as like punching and jumping, it's very simple. There's not a whole lot to it. I thought the checkpoints were pretty generous on where they're at. And so I don't know. I've just mentioned all that. Anything you're thinking? I don't know if you had any comments on how Donald controls or.
I real quick. Like I like that. I like how he controls. I think it's well done. It feels tight enough. I had seen some complaints in some reviews that his controls were just awful. I didn't really notice that.
Yeah,
I like that for killing enemies that you can jump on their heads or punch them. So you've got both options. I think that's great. I think that kind of lends to the old school and the new school and just gives you different approaches to situations. You can like bounce off things to get height and stuff like that if you want to. And otherwise you got the double jump to help you. Wish there maybe had been a few more moves. I don't know what they might have been per se. I don't know if like a ranged move, like a weapon or like throwing apples, like in some of the older games, something like that. But there's not. So, but punching, you have to be pretty close to do it. But I had seen complaints about that, but I didn't have any troubles with that either. So, it seems pretty fair. And almost all the enemies are just kind of one hit kill, which is great. I don't like games where it just like needlessly makes you hit something like 3 times.
Totally.
So yeah, in general, I think that's kind of my main takeaways from the gameplay. I liked the gameplay very much.
One other thing I want to mention, kind of probably the saving grace of this game is there is 0 camera control because it's literally all handled by the game. And I think that works to its benefit. I feel like if this game had even some camera control, I think it would really hurt it. So I appreciated that. Like, there's very few times where it was like difficult to gauge depth. But for the most part, as long as you jumped and then maybe double jumped, you were pretty certain that you're going to clear, whatever part. And so there was nothing that where the camera was getting caught on things or because you're really just whatever, direction you're heading in the level, that's it. And you're just kind of letting it do its own thing.
Yeah, I did like in the 2D sections too, depending on which way you were looking, left or right, it did kind of shift the camera slightly to that direction to help you see a little bit ahead of you.
Right.
So, I found that very helpful. Like when I was on like this kind of hovering platform thing, I was trying to see if there was a hidden area to the left or whatever, because I could see that there was something above me to the right. And when I kind of turned my character, or Donald, left, like the camera panned over and I could see a ledge, and I thought that was great. I also like, and this is something, people talk about in like the retro Donkey Kong Country games, like anything that's like a floating platform has some sort of reason that it's floating. It's got like a propeller, and like what I love about some of them, or the ones that I really stood out to me, was like they had the propeller and then like just mechanical feet pedaling a bicycle thing to make the propeller spin. I thought that was like clever and unnecessary. So
Yeah.
little touches like that are always appreciated by me, and I'm sure many. So
Definitely.
This is a cool little detail.
Nice. No, that's totally worth noting. There's like floating platforms that are suspended by, I don't know if it's balloons or something, and then once you jump on them, they kind of fall down or whatever. The enemies in this game are, some of them like make sense and are like, oh, it's like a guy working in the town with a jackhammer, and then sometimes it's like, oh, it's this weird Aztec spiky thing. So sometimes it feels like it fits in the universe, and sometimes it doesn't. But overall, nothing that was like super frustrating. No like super cheap like bat enemy that you can't kill that comes out of nowhere. And
nothing zooming at you at light speed like an electrocuted cat.
Totally. And so overall, I always felt like I was in control. You kind of approach an enemy and you're like, all right, I can either jump on this guy or I can like get a little bit closer and punch him. One other notable enemy in the scary level, there's this old duck guy that's in a wheelchair with like a machete, which is a little like intense for a kid's game. He's a little tough because you kind of have to attack him when his back's turned, otherwise he'll get you. But other than that, no, honestly, the gameplay is relatively polished, I would say.
Yeah, I thought so.
Even if it's maybe not your cup of tea. Let's talk difficulty real quick. Honestly, I think most people would argue that this game was developed and made for kids.
Yeah.
And so I would argue it's on the easier side, especially the levels. The bosses I actually struggled with. Even though a lot of the reviews I was watching were saying that the bosses were easy.
Same.
But as I'm watching footage of different versions, I'm starting to realize some of the other versions, the bosses seem easier. So I don't know. I can't say it without actually playing them, but I didn't get through any of the bosses on my first try. I died multiple times. And it really, I actually did have to focus. I'm like, all right. And you have to like be careful. Like there were a couple times where I'd take a hit really early, and so I would just jump off and start over because I just took a hit so early. And so the bosses are actually challenging, and I could see kids struggling maybe with those. But other than that, the levels are pretty easy. Depending on how quickly you take them, or if you kind of take your time and you're looking for everything, it can take you a little bit longer. But really, not a overly difficult game.
Right.
I don't know. Do you agree?
Yeah, that pretty much summarizes how I feel about it. It seems to be geared a little more towards kids, and one of the few games where it seems like it could be beaten by a little kid, whereas a lot of the games that we've talked about on this show have had that blockbuster brutal difficulty spike. So it's like this one, it does get harder, and there's like narrower platforms and pitfalls and stuff that weren't in the first levels, but like and like harder enemies or whatever, where it's like, the machete guy, you gotta wait till he turns around, or the flaming pumpkins, you just can't jump on them when they're on fire. But like in general, nothing cheap. Like we said, there wasn't any of those enemies that just like take a cheap shot at you. There's no insta-death enemies. Everything is 2 hits. So I think maybe the only other thing they could have done is have like enemies dropping health and or having 3 hit points, but like that's really and that would be for like little kids. But in general, I don't think it's that hard. And
especially in the bosses, there were some parts where I was like, give me some health, and I think the final boss does give you some health, and so I was appreciative of that, because it was like at some point I was like, it was a little frustrating. But let me see, I was trying to think. Final boss. One other thing I guess I can mention, I don't know where else to put this in the episode. There's a completely unique mechanic that is only present in the final boss, and I don't know. If you don't want to hear this, I guess maybe it's a spoiler. Whatever. Fast forward if you plan on playing this game, I guess. Yeah, you basically run over to this turret and you shoot at the final boss with this machine gun type thing, which is cool, but completely unique to the final boss and nowhere else in the game. So I don't know. I got to the end and I was like, I got to the last level and I finally felt like the game was kind of finally getting to it, like figuring itself out. The last level, I was like, okay, it's finally ramping up, but then it's over. And so I saw quite a few people weren't a fan of how short the game is. I think that was a lot of people thought it was too short. Which honestly, there's enough to do here. I think there's even like a time trial where you can go back through and try to beat the level super quick, I think. And so that helps, add some longevity to it. But yeah, I don't know. I just felt like difficulty-wise, if you are targeting not kids, that where they were at on like the last level as far as level design, enemy design, and just overall difficulty, it was finally kind of coming into itself, and then it was over. And then things like the machine gun turret thing was like, oh, this is really cool. Too bad they don't have more of this. And so there were certain things where I wish they had explored more of it, or maybe because after a while it does get a little monotonous. But thankfully, it does end when it does, because I feel like if you had to do like 4 more worlds after that, nobody would finish it just because you'd get tired of it.
If they weren't introducing new mechanics at that point or something, I
right.
agree.
So with what they have, I think where they stopped it makes sense, because otherwise it would just get really old.
I agree.
But I would love to have seen them add some more things later on, some rideable mounts or more upgrades to Donald, different projectiles like you mentioned. There's some things they could have done to make it better, and for whatever reason, they chose not to do that, and that's fine. It's still a good little, platformer. For someone who's kind of played these kinds of games, it's a good one that you can really just kind of sit there and zone out. In fact, my father called me in the middle while I was playing this, and I literally just kept on playing and talked to him on speakerphone. No disrespect to my father, I was paying plenty of attention to what he was saying, and we had a good conversation. Right. So it's like a real fun casual game. So if you're like wanting just like a really easy playthrough of something, like I don't think there's anything wrong with this one, as far as that goes. So I don't know, I guess I'm getting a little ahead of myself, maybe closer toward the end. Jeff, could you either read this or just paraphrase kind of the story of this game? What kind of plot line do we have here?
Sure, I'll just read it because I don't know that I can summarize it. All right, so it says, Goin Quackers begins with Donald Duck, Gladstone Gander, and Gyro Gearloose watching television. Reporter Daisy Duck.
Good grammar.
Yeah, sorry. Watching television, reporter
fault.
Daisy Duck discovering. I just read it with a weird. Anyway, cadence. There we go. Discovering the mysterious temple of the evil magician Murloc, which is just really weird, but yeah, we'll go with it. As she tells her story, she's kidnapped by Murloc live on TV. Whoa. His arch rival Gladstone sets out to find her before Donald, who decides to use Gyro's new invention, the tubal teleport system, to track down Murloc and Daisy. However, the machine doesn't have enough power to get there, and to make the machine work again... Oh yeah, this grammar is awful.
Yeah.
To make the machine working again, Donald must go on a journey to restore power to the machine. So that explains why we go through all these other levels. Along the way, he must compete with Gladstone, reverse the spells that Murloc put on Huey, Dewey, and Louie's toys, and defeat several bosses, including the Beagle Boys and Magica Dispel. In the end, Donald is able to locate Murloc, he defeats him, and rescues Daisy. Spoiler alert.
Spoiler!
The temple collapses, but Gyro is able to teleport them back to his lab, where Donald receives a kiss from Daisy on his down low for saving her. What? That sounds awful.
On his down low. I don't know where I found that. Apparently, I should have
probably
pulled
the
it from the
Wiki.
manual. Yeah.
That's okay. It's a good summarization with just some really weird terminology. I think maybe they meant off to the side because Gladstone had a crush on her, and that's sort of spelled out in the opening cutscene, which is really weird. because Donald and Daisy are very much an item, I've always thought. So anyway.
Yeah.
So that's the story. It's kind of, along with most of the other ones that we've had, if there have been stories. Some damsel in distress getting kidnapped and the hero going after her, and yeah.
Yeah, like I said earlier, it's weird because you get to the end and Donald's like about to rescue Daisy, and then all of a sudden Gyro's like, wait, Donald, before you do that, you got to get the thing, the wind thing, and he's like, oh yeah, and I'm just like, what? This whole game is just...
Yeah, because there's nothing about that before that.
Right, it's like you're just there to get Daisy, and all of a sudden it's like, don't do that yet, and I'm like, why not? It's a little weird.
Yeah.
Other than that, I think it's fine that they added Murloc. Like I said, he's kind of in universe, so it works.
Yeah.
They didn't have to create a whole new character if they didn't want to. Yeah, I don't know. I guess the whole thing with Gladstone is in some of the versions, as you're going through, he shows up and he basically he's the one that does the speed run part, where if you can beat a level in a certain amount of time, he gives you something. I don't know. I noticed on the N64 one, when you beat a level, there's 3 different things that you can fill in. One of them is the puzzle piece to unlock the boss. One of them is Huey doing Louie's toys, and I believe the third one represents doing his speed run, time trial thing. But
that makes sense, because I wasn't sure what that was.
But I don't know if it explains it, because I don't remember it.
No,
so
I
I assume... But I was going to say maybe if you went back into the level, it would give you the option. But I played levels multiple times, and I don't remember seeing it. So I don't know, maybe I just missed it. But just don't feel like it was communicated properly. But whatever, it's still cool. I don't know why Daisy would be reporting at Murloc making a machine
like
or
in
something.
His hidden lair. Yeah,
right.
It's really
It
weird.
doesn't fully make sense. But
Like, what happened to her cameraman? Like, there's definitely a cameraman, right? Or was
Yeah.
it just on a tripod?
yeah, that's a great question. What happened to him or her? So yeah, not a terrible storyline by any means,
Yeah.
but nothing like super groundbreaking. But I guess it builds a little bit of character. There's multiple characters from the Donald Duck universe, so that's cool, I guess. So that's the story. Real quickly, levels, as I mentioned, there are 1, 2, 3, 4 level world areas that all have 4 levels each. The first area is Ducky Mountain, I guess, which is kind of a dumb name. The boss is Bernadette the chicken, which is this giant chicken, I guess.
Yep.
That chicken's face is the most Rayman looking thing in this entire game.
I hadn't thought of that, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It doesn't really fit. It feels out of character. Bonus running away stage that you unlock with Huey and Louie, and that one has Humphrey Bear. Everybody knows
Throwback
Humphrey.
Disney character, yeah.
Yeah, he's a good little guy. Then next up you have Duckburg, as everyone knows it, so cityscape type area. Boss is Beagle Boy, which I noticed in other versions you get all 3 Beagle Boys, but in the N64 it's just 1. So
yeah.
bonus running away stage is the Beagle Boys delivery truck. Then the third area is Magica Dispel's Manor, which is a spooky, kind of scary area. She's the boss. The bonus running away stage is a ghostly glove that is coming after you. Probably the same glove from Smash Bros, but not confirmed. Final area is Murloc's Temple, which kind of has like an Egyptian type feel to it. Murloc is the boss, and he turns into like this weird pterodactyl dragon thing, which is cool because he has like that pendant around his neck, which is also taken from the movie.
Okay.
Not that you would know because you're not a Disney fan, but
Hey,
sorry, harsh. But you watched Goof Troop today for the God knows how manyth time, and you haven't seen the freaking DuckTales movie. No excuses, but. And then the bonus running away stage is a falling stone, and by stone I think it means like giant boulder. Indiana Jones style. I didn't play any of these levels. I unlocked the first one, but I didn't play it for some reason, which is stupid. I purposely tried to get all of them in the first area so I could check it out, and I just never did for some reason. But I think you have to go back to, I can't remember which boy is standing there, to unlock it, and I just forgot to. Huey, Dewey. I think Louie is the green one.
I don't remember, honestly.
Dewey's the blue one.
Okay.
And then there's a way to remember which one's the red one, and I forget what that is. And then the last one is the green one, but I forget. So yeah, those are the 4 areas. Each one has 4 stages, like I mentioned. We're not really gonna get specific with them because they do vary in specific ways, but they really do kind of blend all together because the whole aesthetic is pretty similar. So it would just bore you to hear it, I think. So yeah, so that's kind of it in a nutshell. Figure we could go ahead and give our final thoughts. If it's okay with you, Jeffrey, I will go first, and then you could go, and then I could close us out if that works.
That sounds good.
So I had this thought last night when I was playing this. Part of me wishes, and maybe this is selfish of me, I kind of wish this was just an N64 game. Like, I just wish that this game had only come out on N64, even though it's the worst version out of all of these. Mostly because I think it would make it more unique, and I'd be like, oh, cool. There's this, like, Donald Duck game that was made by Ubisoft that only came out on the N64, and it's it's basically Crash Bandicoot, but on the rivaling platform. And I don't know, I think it'd be more endearing. But really, it feels more like a cash grab by Ubisoft that they're like, hey, we got this license. Let's milk this puppy for all it's worth. And so, obviously, when you have different versions, it's you start comparing.
Yep.
I don't know. So it's just a random thought I had. Like, oh, if this was just kind of a weird, like, B list, N64 game, maybe it'd be a little more endearing. But kind of the whole time you're playing, I'm like, I should probably be playing the GameCube version of this. And I love the N64, so I want to, like, appreciate it for what it is. But I mean, when you put the two side by side, the GameCube one, you're just gonna gravitate toward wanting to play and look at that one. Overall, like I said, it's a fun game. As an adult, it's a decent playthrough. It's not overly challenging. If you speed through it, you can knock it out in one sitting. If you wanted to collect everything, it still wouldn't be that much more difficult, but there is a slight challenge involved. I mentioned the bosses are a bit harder than the rest of the game. Something I didn't mention, you basically just have a bunch of lives the entire game. Basically after the first world area, I had 15 plus lives the entire game, if not more. And then usually by the time I hit the boss, I'd lose quite a number of them, and it would bring me back down. But really, there was never a point where I was risking running out of lives. And so for an adult or a young adult or whatever, it's a pretty easy game. But if you're looking for a game to show your kids that maybe is a little bit easier, this could be a good one. I don't know why parents would be looking for N64 games to have their kid play, but whatever. But overall, not terrible. I honestly thought it was going to be worse. So it handles and plays fine. Like it feels polished in that aspect. Some of the negatives, like I mentioned, is just lack of cutscenes and the story not making a whole lot of sense. But really, when it comes down to it, not a bad game. Better than I thought it was going to be. So
excellent. Yeah. I echo a lot of what you just said. So, really, my final thoughts are that it is a great game. It was a lot better than I expected as well, and so I definitely recommend it to Disney fans, anybody who likes the Duck universe. Just in general, like platforming and collectible type games of that late 90s, early 2000s era. It's a it's a very well-made game for any of those fans. And yeah, I'd probably say you'd want to play the N64 or the GameCube or PS2 version. But the N64 one is unique and is charming in and of itself, if not just to kind of see the funny attempt at real-time cutscenes and all that.
Yeah.
Plus some of the other stuff. The soundtrack on this one, it's good, but I'm actually curious to check out the soundtrack on the other ones. Yeah, that's pretty much it. It's a good game. I recommend it.
Awesome. All right, guys. Well, that has been Donald Duck Goin Quackers. And thank you so much for joining us this week. If you haven't already, please give us a follow on Twitter. We don't update it very regularly other than when we post new episodes, but maybe that's a good thing. Maybe you like that. Maybe you don't like your feed completely kerfuddled with things, and so maybe you just want to know when our newest episode comes out. Or maybe you want to know every time Jeph plays Sea of Thieves. Who knows? It's hard to say. If you're not a Twitter person, you can also go to thenintendovillage.com. From there, you can find links to all of our episodes, as well as some other great shows, including one that I do all about Game Boy games called Strictly Game Boy. So if you want, you can check that out. Maybe something interesting going on in the future with that and this show. Who knows? Guys, you can also find video versions of these episodes on the Nintendo Village YouTube page, where I show off my sweet skills and video gameplay. So you'll get to see the 2 hours it took me to beat this game. And so yeah, if you enjoy watching some gameplay while you're listening, maybe you're sitting at work and you got a computer where your boss doesn't care if you have Donald Duck gameplay on your computer, feel free to look us up, give us a like and subscribe, and we'll be posting more from there in the future. So yeah, guys, like I said, hopefully we'll have a new episode for you here soon. Unfortunately, most of my games are packed away, but we're going to do everything in our power to make it happen. Join us next time for our episode about, assuming everything goes according to plan, The Emperor's New Groove, which is on the Game Boy Color, I believe. So look forward to that one. Yeah, I kind of put this out there on my other show. If you want, feel free to play that game or whatever game is our next episode, and play along, kind of like a book club of sorts, and you can play and then listen to our thoughts and also share your thoughts with us. So
yeah, comment on the videos if you want, or tweet at us. Yeah,
let us know. We'd love to hear from you. We're not mean or cocky or bashful, so we'd love to hear from you. Till then, guys, thanks so much for listening, and have a great day.
And remember, if you do feel a quack attack coming on, just take a deep breath and count to 3. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe, check out some of our other videos, and visit thenintendovillage.com, your home for everything Nintendo.